Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile, Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you're tuning in or listening to this in the future. This is Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth, and we broadcast weekly on KUNX, digital broadcasting, the UNX. And tonight was one of those shows that was really interesting preparing for. Our guest, due to a shared interest of ours, but one I had not actively been pursuing or thinking about much for the past few decades, kind of reinvigorated that memory of things that are on the surface of the moon, the Mars, other moons of other planets, the odd asteroid, that are either extraordinary optical illusions or plays of light, or simply should not be there, according to conventional thinking. And my guest and comrade in arms tonight is Ben Moss. Ben is a UFO researcher, investigator, and author of the really outstanding single case history called Not of This World, the Socorro UFO Landing with Humanoids. He has investigated well over 100 cases, is a former MUFON Field Investigator, as well as the Chief Field Investigator for MUFON Virginia. Ben formed his own company, the UFO Guys LLC, which is dedicated to the study of UFO phenomena. He has been a frequent guest at numerous UFO conferences for years now. He has also appeared as a guest researcher on Netflix, the History Channel, the Travel Channel, National Geo, and the Discovery Channel. He is currently working to capture his own instrumented UFO evidence to be scientifically analyzed in order to show proof of non-human propulsion systems. Using science with an understanding of history, physics, and all the other related proven scientific methods, he is attempting to prove that some UFOs are not of this world. And Ben, welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep, just fine.
All righty.
I wanted to begin by bringing attention to an outstanding case study that you and your co-author produced some years back about one of the most intriguing, legendary cases out there. And before we get on to a subject of the evening, can you give us, especially for obviously viewers who are not familiar with this incident, a capsule history first of how you guys got so involved in it and what caused you to write this book?
Yeah, we, Tony Angiola and I, he was assistant state director at MUFON Virginia. We had met at a networking event, I think around 2014, and I had convinced him to go to Cherry Hill, New Jersey for the MUFON symposium, mentioning that several of the speakers were getting up in the years, and that's right around when Stanton had his first heart attack. And so that kind of put a rush on things. And we went up there, and we when we were watching James Fox do his presentation, he had mentioned Socorro, and I was kind of familiar with it, but not that familiar with it. I remember seeing something on TV about it. So there was some footage that I had seen on TV from a tourist that had gone by the site right after the UFO event occurred. So I promised James, foolishly probably, that I would find that footage. And that started us on this journey. They had 2 issues of the MUFON Journal where we searched for the lost Socorro footage. Basically, what happened in Socorro was a police officer was on random patrol, picked up a speeder, but as he was chasing this speeder, he knew who the 17-year-old kid was. He was kind of hanging back. He saw a blue flame and an object kind of roar over him, and he thought, being the kind of officer that Lonnie Zamora was in Socorro, New Mexico, he broke off the chase and in his brand new police car took 3 tries to go up this hill in this arroyo out in the Socorro desert, because he figured either a plane was crashing or there was somebody in trouble. And as he crested the hill, he finally saw what he thought was an overturned van. And as he got closer, it was an egg-shaped object sitting on 4 landing gear. And then as he got much closer, he saw 2 small humanoids. And he knew they were about 4 feet tall because there's a creosote bush there. And it was only 4 feet tall, and they were the same height as this creosote bush. And so he got out of his car. The beans were startled by his appearance. So they looked like they had jumped when they saw him. They jumped back in this egg-shaped craft that had a symbol on it. And with a kind of a little bit of a roar, this blue flame knifed out underneath it, lifted up into the air. Lonnie threw himself on the ground, and the blue flame went off. And this, if this had been a propulsion of a rocket, Earth made, it would have cooked him because he was within 50 feet of this craft. So it kind of knifed into the ground and left radiation, was detected later. The blue flame cut off. The craft hung motionless for a while, and then slowly started towards the southwest, the Perlite Mill area of Socorro, and then accelerated to probably supersonic speed, eventually leaving the area. So that was, Lonnie was one of the best witnesses, being a police officer, didn't know anything about UFOs, didn't care about UFOs.
Yeah.
Later, he wished he had never told, if he had a chance to do it again, he would have never told anybody.
Yeah.
And as we investigated, we started finding out that there were multiple sightings at the Air Force Base, Holloman nearby. There were several other police officers that said they had also seen it. And then I finally got to the point where we were on Kevin Randall's show, and he ended up writing a book after we talked about it. I'm like, well, I should have written the book first. So Tony and I got together and we started putting this book together. And as we dug into it, I found so many newspaper articles about egg-shaped craft sighted in this area in this time frame. And La Madera happened, which was the same type of vehicle, same marks. There were several other instances that told me there was egg-shaped craft in this area at this time all over the place. And so the more we dug, the more evidence we came up with. And I've been to Socorro 4 times now. I've talked to his family. And there was this, I went in trying to see if I could find a hole in the story or an explanation. And there just wasn't one. The couple of the professors at New Mexico, first they said it was a hoax. I pretty much showed that it was impossible to be a hoax. And then a lot of people said it was a lunar lander, which is ludicrous because the lunar lander was being tested 30 miles away at Holloman. Wouldn't be in the desert. Plus, it wasn't flying in that time frame. It didn't start flying until about 9 months later. And the first 2 test flights ended with the pilots ejecting to save their lives because the engine used what's called hydroxide, which is a very caustic material and causes the engine to seize up. It was supposed to fly in no atmosphere. So there's no way this thing was being tested in the Socorro Desert, a top secret thing when you have Air Force Base 40 miles away or so where you can test this thing. And it wasn't flying at the time. So that's what got us going. James Fox started us on this journey, and we finished it by writing the book.
Well, when I read the book, of course, I was familiar with the case, but there's a genre within UFO publishing that we'll call case histories, very simply. And in order to be effective to publish one, I think you've got to walk that line between being absolutely unquestioned scholarship, dot every I and cross every T. Everything needs to be followed up in the most strict scientific manner, but it can be very dry in trying to communicate the narrative along with all of the technical information. And you guys walk that line really well. I found parts of it an absolute page turner. And what it all comes down to, besides the obvious, we're not alone. and the technology that the various days collectively manifest are myriad. But it comes down to yet one more very human story, in this case, of a very decent local guy serving honorably in a career in law enforcement who, stumbles into the Twilight Zone.
Yep.
And with all the attendant ridicule for telling the truth. And, I can only thank him, after the fact. People like Barney Hill, Calvin Parker, we could go on and name quite a list of them who are well known and well respected in our area of interest, but who really probably wish that the day had turned out differently.
Yeah, it didn't make life easier, that's for sure.
No. And our subject for the day, we were chatting a bit before we went on the air, and I told you how I had first become interested in it, which I'd like to share with my friends in the audience. In a few years into my obsession, it wasn't even an interest when it kicked in, and it wasn't even necessarily healthy. It was all I thought about for some years. I came upon a book called Extraterrestrial Archaeology. It was published 1976. David Childress, one of his first. No, I'm sorry. This is 1993. This wasn't the one I came upon. It was in 76. This book was published. Someone Else is on the Moon. And it's really quite a visionary book. George Leonard went over photographs that he was not able, or didn't have permission, I forget the backstory, able to reproduce of anomalies on the moon. And hundreds of them are carefully copied out in this book. Anyway, it set my interest off, and I learned, again, this is several decades before the internet. I have maybe 4 colleagues. I don't know from conferences, it's still years before I'm going to go to a UFO conference. And we learned that, having nothing to do with UFOs, NASA offered a service whereby one of their catalogs that you would order by mail, it was either gratis or $1 or whatever, had little tiny images, reductions of single frames of footage that had been shot on passes around the moon. But these were 8 by 10 glossy original chemical prints. Hasselblad, this is the technology, that the state of the art. And you could order them for $1 each, and just go over them with a magnifying glass and, enjoy the visit. I'm as sure as I can be that NASA certainly didn't have the budget to hire dedicated employees or put them on the job of going over these photographs, hundreds of thousands of them, thousands that they, allowed to come into public domain, without, somebody. I don't think that somebody went over every micrometer with a loop and a 10-power glass. And if they did, they missed stuff. And myself and my first mentors, Detective Sergeant Pete Mazzola of the New York City Police Department, a very brilliant ufologist, and my first contemporary colleague, Antonio Huneas. I think we kicked in $25 or $30, and we ordered a couple of dozen photographs, divided them up, and started to go over them. And we each found a few things that seemed that they didn't fit, that they didn't happen in nature, that we couldn't explain. I think that service lasted only a year or two, and then it was taken off the market. But you, on your Facebook page, are in the habit of posting images, NASA images of Mars for some time now, and they're always eye-catching and worth looking at. And here's where, not setting a ground rule for our discussion here, but I think it's fair to say that we're both predisposed to this issue, that It's exciting to think analytically, professionally, in terms of just the implications of it, that there might be the remains of activity, organized activity by intelligences, our ancestors, visitors from other places, interdimensional creatures visiting, of activity, whether it's buildings or seeming artifacts scattered about. As a trained artist and somebody with a really good imagination, and I think a lot of us can relate to this, it's fun to find faces in nature and to try to add significance sometimes to a perfectly natural thing. Kind of sort of a more innocent sister of conspiracy theory thinking. Gee, is that really a bunch of rocks piled up, or is that a secret entrance to an underground cavern? Uh, and so many of these photos came, as you post them on your page, the mission number, the photo number, other technical information. I haven't included that, although anybody that wants to follow up on what we're about to see and our feelings about these images, um, it's a very easy trip. And I'd like you to tell us, before we start to look at these images, Ben, where folks can have an entry level to jumping into this with us.
Yeah, JPL has there's several sites on NASA that'll allow you to look at the images. Now, whether or not they've been doctored is a whole other story, but I usually post them on the UFO Guys link on Facebook. And Peter, I can't see anything. I'm still backstage, so I'm not sure if you're showing anything.
No, I'm not yet.
Okay. Yeah. So I try to post the ones that are unusual because there's certain things that don't occur naturally in nature, certain, right angles and things. And probably one of the first images of Mars that caught my attention looked like a foundation. It was a complete square.
Yes,
like
I've got that.
Yeah, of a building. And I thought, well, how in the world would that occur in nature? And knowing, that Mars has lost its atmosphere about 4 billion years ago, who knows what was on that planet a long, long time ago?
Without question. And there may be explanations. You and I are not trained scientists by any stretch of the imagination, where natural occurrences in geology can account for certain things that we're seeing, fractaling or shapes seeming to organize themselves, or the remains of some ancient process that looks to us like an intelligently constructed or vaguely, reminiscent of something that humans build on Earth. Again, the book that I first started to pick through to be inspired by this was published, Extraterrestrial Archaeology, in 1976. And I'm going to start with 4 illustrations from it. You see the relative quality compared to what we're about to see is less than spectacular. But it's a simple thing. And having an interest in prehistoric Britain and ancient hill forts and cairns and geomancing of the earth, it's very hard for me to read this as a crater as much as a roughly dome shape within a crater. This is the simplest example. And again, it's off round. One can argue that the shadows and erosion, but it's just something that stops me and makes me think, could this have simply happened in nature? And of course, it's miles across. This one, which is, to the best of my knowledge, undoctored, it's referred to, this was part of the intriguing images of the Cydonia region of Mars that became so well known through the work of Richard Hoagland, and all of the attention around the alleged original face on Mars, which I've actually had to knock out of this array of photos the system we use only allows me to load 100 images in, and I had so many more than 100 that I wanted to look at. But how the hell would this happen in nature? And nobody has attacked this photo, and of course the original is considerably sharper, as manipulated. What geological process created that thing?
I can't see it, so I can't.
Oh, you can't see it?
No, I can't see. I can't see anything. I got a black screen right now. It says I'm backstage.
Oh no. Well, Race, do you see what our issue is here? Because my thing indicates that Ben is with me here in the room, and he isn't seeing the images. What do you say, Race? Well, we have a double challenge here. Well, let me just.
You want me
Live
to try
radio, folks. As I've said many times, this could be a podcast. Everything edited out, nice and cool. We prefer the crash and burns occasionally that happen in real life.
You want me to log back in, or just wait to see what you come up with?
Yeah, why not? Log out and log in. I'm sure I'll find a few words to fill our spot with, but I'll look forward to you returning shortly.
I will do that, sir.
So I am hoping, cautiously optimistic, that you folks who are watching do see the images that are here. Again, beginning with the most simple. But what are we looking at here? Is this a shape or a series of shapes that could happen in nature? I guess it's possible. I'm going to hold off on the next one because I'm not going to hold off on it. In the same book, and I don't think David went out of his way to find fabrications of any sort, but there was this image, which I'm first taking up, and...
Okay, I can see that.
Okay. Then, let me pick up where we were. This image was one that was referred to in maps of Cydonia as the nickname The Fortress. It's most intriguing. And do you have any thoughts about it right off the top of your head? Is it one you're familiar with?
Yeah, that there's the D&M pyramid, because I did get Dark Mission by Richard Hoagland. That whole area, I mean, it looks like an ancient wasteland of some type of civilization. But yeah, this one I was intrigued because on the right side you have a square cut. Looks like it's a total square, and also it looks like some circular.
Yes,
on the top right of that wall, and then something overlaying the top of it. But it doesn't. No. It just doesn't look natural to me. And maybe there's a hole there where that darkness is. You can see the shadow of the wall on the right, so it's obviously above the ground. It just doesn't look like your normal erosion type of
Now, from your years of looking at UFO photographs the same way I do, the same way anybody that is interested in that subject and looks at enough pictures, there's a general law of physics. If it looks too good to be true, it almost always is too good to be true. And so there's a kind of a funny mechanism looking at some of these images that maybe you'll experience with me, viewers and Ben, of can that be? Well, the money shot in extraterrestrial archaeology, and it's not a great reproduction, but I thought, if this hasn't been manipulated, and this is, again, a few decades before Photoshop, not that the image is so crude regarding its finesse that, let's see, Race, if you're listening, is there any way to not that we don't want people to know, but to remove for a little bit the tonight's special guest, Ben Moss, so that we have a little better viewing. And this image is upside down anyway, so well done, Peter. But as you can see, what you can see is it shouldn't be there. It shouldn't happen in a natural way. In fact, I think I'm going to go to the book, as we say in the sports business. So,
yeah, I remember that image. Very peculiar. It looks like an airport.
that was my first thought. And as we go on, we'll see some pretty intense stuff. And I just wanted to put that one first. I think there are things that we can agree. This is Mars. And again, across the top, this officially released photo. Of course, that doesn't mean any of these things couldn't have been manipulated. But if you find yourself falling back on that idea on more and more of them, perhaps it's a bit more challenging than you're comfortable with. This, for me, I don't know, the dynamics of how it could form, but why not? And these are photos probably taken several hundred miles up, these particular ones, and nothing to suggest to me that that's anything other than a really interesting series of natural, if unusual, formations.
Could be some water erosion too, because there was flowing water on Mars.
Yeah. I'm going to give a quick example of something that zealots, that's not even fair, but enthusiastic followers of this particular area of paranormal studies really jump on, which is either identifying something extraordinary that really relates to Earth history on a foreign body, or is that really a face in when I cut the cabbage in half, or is that cloud really the shape of a lamb or a chicken? But here it is. Now, this is one of those things where my first thought is, I can accept that is a 1 in 1,000 quirky play of light on a rock formation that isn't actually a possible ancient style bust in the manner practiced several thousand years ago in a number of cultures. And you know what? If I learned that it was the remains of a classical type bust or statue on Mars, I don't think I'd lose a night's sleep over it. What's your gut feeling on that one?
Yeah, that would be a little pareidolia for me. It's I'm sure that looks different under different lighting.
Yeah.
And so it's coming from an angle, but if the sun's in a different position, you probably wouldn't see that at all. But because of the terrain around it, it doesn't look like it's part of anything. It's probably just, our imagination a little bit.
Well, that was, of course, the big disappointment for so many people. And again, who knows at what level we're seeing the absolute truth. But that second pass over the face on Mars, and either the light playing so differently that it didn't look anything like a face, or somebody moving the dials and the numbers a bit. This is one of those ones that I can understand somebody getting pretty excited about, because I'd like it to be true. But, okay, the Mars tubes, these do intrigue me. They're massive. They go on for miles and miles, and they must be just huge inside and seem to be of a transparentish material. Or am I reading too much into this phenomena of the Martian tubes. Your thought, Ben?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of these images, and they seem to be really a lot of these, as you said, miles long. It's hard to say, if this is some kind of water conveyance that's natural, but the way that it's kind of ribbed, it does look like some type of construction.
Yeah.
And the ribs are a part of the construction, but it's transparent. I just, not knowing a whole lot about geology, I really couldn't say how this was formed, but it does look like those are, reinforced tubes. And then you have that reflection, which is kind of strange that it's showing up like that. But the ridges also look like they're curving around the tube, not just straight lines, which makes it even more intriguing.
The other thing is a sense of scale. Of course, they can, measure these things fairly accurately, but this is a huge, complex construction, if it is a construction, or again, I hope, any viewer or listener with more technical savvy than us will either be contributing in the chat room or getting back to me and Ben on anything that you feel we're completely misinterpreting or going off on a tangent. Now, there was a series of formations, I don't know what else to call them, natural or constructed, that became known as the Inca City, simply because Chichen Itza, certain ancient Mesoamerican civilizations photographed from the air had a similar look and feel. And here's the first example.
Yeah, that's a tough one because I believe in some ways that could be explained by natural geology, but it's hard to say. I mean, I remember in a place here on Earth, there was what looked like cut stones out of a wall, but that's how the rock actually forms. This basalt looks like it's constructed, but it's not. It's just the way that basalt forms. But yeah, this is the thing is about these images. If there was a civilization there from millions of years ago, if there's anything remaining, it was built really well, and it would look kind of strange, but still maybe have a non-natural look to it. And this one I'm kind of on the wall about because I've seen something like that on Earth that is a natural formation.
I'm with you on this.
The Mars was hit by a tremendous asteroid. They've recently done some work that they think an asteroid hit the planet and melted half of the planet. Which is a large impact because Mars is it's the second smallest planet. Mercury is the only planet in the solar system that's smaller. But if it was here, if it was a civilization from millions of years ago, then anything remaining, gosh, they had to have been masters of architecture.
You've really captured my thoughts. And one of the interesting areas in terms of fine-tuning your thinking is the difference between a photograph at a slightly different magnification or angle, or just the connecting area as it moves into the natural terrain again. And this is a follow-up to this image. And this one, I find even a bit harder, whatever calibration, to simply dismiss as natural. And again, if now look at it in the lower right there, those distinctly rectangular.
Yeah.
How, if it is like a massive crystalline kind of phenomena, a structure forms by, we're not trying to push this point of view as much as bring it to your attention. I think it really needs to kind of be revived as a major issue. If this material, appeared on, let's say, Leslie Kean took up this cause, and this became the subject of a major New York Times piece at the same time as, Fox dedicated attention to it, that media represented the left and the right. Politics aside, this transcends it. And the implications, of course, are huge. But once again, this one walks the line for us.
Yeah, I went doing a little research on the cameras that they use on Mars. There's all kinds of explanations about why the images are fuzzy, because Mars is orange, and when you add a contrast, a white light contrast, it makes the impression that it's a blue sky. There's all these explanations as to why these cameras don't give you a clear picture, and at some point it sounds a little ridiculous, because the one thing I noticed, I'm trying to get my lighting right here. The one thing I noticed on some of the moon pictures are that there is some obscure software. The software is trying to obscure the image. And sometimes they obscure the image, but they forget about the shadow. There's a couple of towers on the moon that create a shadow. They forgot to get the shadow out. And back in the day, in the 90s, when Hoagland was really pushing this, I remember John McCain actually threatened JPL, said, you need to release all these and stop dicking around, basically, and release them. And so they had to release hundreds of thousands of images that didn't have time to scrub, hoping the software would do the job for them. So sometimes things leak through, and then all the different cameras they use we didn't have 4K, but now we have 4K. But it just seems like they're always making up reasons why you're not getting a clear picture. And
for most of us, we're going to buy it or not be able to argue it away because we don't have the technical knowledge to do so. The next image, also Mars, what we're seeing diagonally, tiny little, almost like dashes, a stitch line. That's not us. That's not one of our devices that made those tracks. We ain't ever been there. And what the hell? What do you say? I find myself trying to play devil's advocate with myself and say, if somebody at NASA, mischief makers, wanted to discredit this kind of thinking from the inside, they could fake this, and then when it's quote unquote discovered, reveal it as an obvious forgery, rather than just say, what was that made that little track?
Which is probably quite large, since this is a really high up. Yeah. It could be a mining operation from a civilization that doesn't even exist anymore.
Bingo. And that would be a good reason to be on Mars or other celestial bodies. And we've discussed that. It's just one of the most tenable points going back to the idea of ancient visitations.
Because we drill little holes to find out where the gold is, and to test the samples where we drill the holes, and then when we find something, we make a bigger hole. But that's really straight and very track-like.
And the shape, the construction, the hole, the operation that is in it, that's not a crater. It's more square than it's circular.
Now, you know what NASA would say, that's a stitching image where the two images were stitched together, and that's the stitch line. That would be their explanation for that.
Well, okay, that's pretty good. You can see a slightly lighter track to it right as well. And again, these are photos taken probably from several hundred miles in the air. So what we're looking at here may be absolutely massive. As you talked about the towers, and we have a few shots of them. But you said something very interesting before, and I thought, I'm glad I put this together, because I had the same feeling, but I wanted to kind of take it to the logical extreme that certain things that happen in nature can mimic things that happen with us human beings. So here is an image. And when we zone on it even closer, now my first thought, because that's where my mindset is at the moment, is, wow, that's a lot of work, but it's almost like, an Incan temple in a way. And that angle of descent seems the same in each one. That's got to be somebody chipping away there. And then, of course, the coup de grace is this is a photograph from Earth here of a operation in a quarry. It's quite a jump from here to here, but if that's what you want to see, that's what you get. And I think this is one of those situations where this particular rock or mineral deposit that we're looking at, this is what it does in nature, rather than this being the remains of an ancient quarry. And I'll say it again, if we were to establish somehow in the future that it is the remains of an ancient quarry, what else is new?
Yeah. It's either or.
We now go here.
There's
and this is the one that set both of you and I off.
Yeah.
And you know what? Game over. WTF. Yeah. What? That couldn't happen.
Building foundation, and there's another straight line to the right of that. I mean, that you got 3 right angles there, which is very rare in nature, unless it's a big block of granite or something. But that looks like something that's partially buried in the ground and probably supported a structure.
This is, we're going to see more complex things than this, and more challenging ones, and more exciting ones. But this is what it all comes down to. Is there any way that we as lay people, or anybody with highly technical knowledge of the possibilities of the way erosion and different, I want to almost talk myself out of it, but this is emblematic of where we're stuck with here. We're not alone. And there's been stuff going on these celestial bodies since time immemorial, very likely, and not us. Now, you find these posts as well. An individual has done their own homework and, give the photograph numbers, and they're the one that zoned in. I don't know whether they did the coloring. But once again, here's a really interesting example of what I would say are really interesting formations that I don't know enough about geology to say that this couldn't have somehow formed on its own, or it certainly could be something constructed. You have any gut feeling on this particular series of images, Ben?
It almost looks like a bend over a telephone pole. I mean, you've got kind of a base structure with 2 crossbars there. It looked like, it just looks like an ancient, non-natural object that, I mean, there's several things in there that if it was just the one long piece, sure. But then you have the cross sections, and you have what looks like cabling, or you have, there's just a lot of structure there that it'd be hard to come up with a natural explanation for how that would form.
Truly.
Baffling comes to mind.
Now, this one came with no provenance. This is one that has, an indication and a code, 1975, that I guess we can chase down. And it looks like Mike Singh posted this. If this is a doctored image, it's really cool and very interesting. If it is genuine imagery from Mars, once again, game over as far as I'm concerned. This is something that would not happen in nature on a planetary surface, to the best of my lay mind. But we can drive ourselves crazy in part because this is what I would call an orphan photograph. Well, not really. Again, it has a name, but I want to believe.
Like an excavation site.
That might be one. Again, this was 1975 photo, but be interesting to follow up on. We also have just above it to the upper left, wide triangular shape as well, or what seems to be in very much a ridge. So if this is real, this is as good as it gets on a certain level.
Yeah, doesn't look natural.
Yeah. Okay. We have all of the JPL and NASA information here, right down to the number, the location. What the hell are we looking at there? That looks like the emblematic craft that so much of our thinking revolves around, no pun intended, or some very large,
Yeah,
particularly.
the issue with these types of images is there have been so many failed missions to Mars, and some where we lost the spacecraft.
Good
That
point.
this could be one of the Russian probes. I think all the Russian probes failed, but this could be a probe that just failed, and it's a piece of it, because I know near the landers they show these images and they come off the tire or something like that. But yeah, that could be one of our failed probes that blew up when it hit the surface. But it looks like
I'll buy that.
Yeah. It
Again,
doesn't look natural, that's for sure.
Yeah. At the same time, Mars is a big planet, and we have to say to ourselves, we land in a location, we have a very static, a small territory that we can roam with our cameras, or, we're static with the lander. And what are the odds? Well, I think we got to go with the more conventional possibilities always before deciding it's the most exotic solution. And yeah, I would buy that that's something that we collectively left there, or as you know, the remains of another country's operation.
Or Giant's outhouse.
Yeah, that too. Now, things get interesting here. This is another one that, if this is authentic and unretouched, and it looks like the real deal, and I've seen a number of variations of this, I don't think what we're seeing over a good part of the lower sections of this and the far right are natural. It looks like a city in a hillside.
Yeah, in doing a little homework, I know that the JPL or NASA will say that you're over pixelating, because they drop these raw images, and as you try to zoom in on them, you can create artifacts. But that sure looks like Nebraska farm fields to me.
Good point, though. This is a longer shot of the so-called Inca City designation, which we are very much up in the air about from this point of view, literally and figuratively.
And Mars has such a violent history. There's one of the towers.
Yes, and this brings me to several pictures where it looks like what we are looking at, the image is either being intentionally fused, or it's being fuzzed out by, to be a little more exotic, its own energy field or something. But we're dealing with things on the ground in focus, and this massive.
Well, the clue to me that this is obscuring software is because of the top left where it says Clementine, and that was a top secret DARPA mission. That 90% of those photos are still classified top secret. So that is an obscuring of something. They don't want you to see what's there, because you can see smudges to the right of it, to the left of it, and above it. They're smudging a whole bunch of things out of this image.
They are. And, you look to the lower right of it, there's a small, seemingly perfectly shaped crater. We don't know how big it is, but we can guess if this is a tower of some sort, it is miles high. Miles. Is it too much to think, as we look at some of these others, that we're talking about not 2 or 3 miles, but 15 or 20 miles? And once again, something's happening there. It's either, and there's, if you don't even have to squint to see the geomets in that shape, but somebody went out of their way to mess with us on this, or this thing is putting off some kind of reaction that is registering on the photograph like this, which I think is the more exotic and less likely explanation. And we see it here too.
Yeah, if it was energy, it wouldn't be so precise. I would think it
Yeah.
would be a halo around it, but you can see clearly on the left that's
Yeah.
a triangle.
Yeah.
And the Richard Hoagland said there was I think a 5.5-mile structure he called the tower, but the Chinese rover also saw that spire. I think it's called the spire, but they also saw it. And I had been in contact with the guy and said, "Are you going to release all this data when it comes out?" He said, "Sure we are." And then 3 years later, they hadn't released it, but they did pick up a couple of things, like the Zond mission from Russia did get a tower on the side of the moon on one of their shots.
And one more.
There's a lot of obscuring going on in this picture. There's looks like a flat building to the left of that tower, another structure in the middle, something to the right.
Yeah, again, at the right edge, almost dead center, one directly above the other, it looks like two white squares,
Yeah.
as opposed to two something else's. There's activity here, no question. Well, no question, or it certainly seems to register that way.
And this is old tech. This is a really bad obscuring job because you can still see something there.
So interesting. Yeah, that's another thing of the thinking of the secret keepers. Who's going to really be looking at this stuff? Maybe some space geek is going to be there, with a big microscope and, going to publish it in their 150 member UFO club newsletter. And, we can just take it easy on this kind of thing. Times change. And it would be very interesting to get the reactions of a number of congressional representatives who are quite serious about this subject if they receive portfolios of these sets of imagery to also request more information on.
The internet changed the game. When you started being able to share images with millions of people that could do a little analysis, then you've got a whole different ball game than some guy that ordered pictures in the 70s and has got a magnifying glass trying to figure out what he's looking at. Now you have pros doing it.
Exactly. This is an issue that we, as well as others, want to light a cheerful little fire under again, because it's so interesting to start with. You're not looking at wording and documents. You're looking at images, JPL NASA images that really push. And as we're going to see, some of them even harder.
And why would Clementine images from the 90s still be top secret?
Now, this for me, I look at it, my first thought is, some, scamp on the internet snuck in an aerial photo of an ancient city in Iraq. And that's what we're seeing here, except that this is allegedly a photo of something that exists on the surface of Mars. I guess fully vetting these things would be quite a process in itself. But once again, if this is one of the ones that is untouched, this is what they saw, this is the image, game over. Except good luck getting people to look at it.
Yeah, the rectangle on the left is perfect.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, it really it does look like the pre-biblical Middle East.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we're about to go to break, but we still have a few short minutes, and we're starting to go into anomalous shapes that we see on the surface in some of these photographs. Once again, in my mind, I really do try to take the side of the skeptics, even the debunkers. But here's another one. What the hell? That's and it'd be wonderful to hear, a really good debunker explanation for it.
The only thing that I could say is it's a piece of our machinery. But when these images are released, they should have an arrow that says this is from the this fell off the panel. This or it's an alien hot tub.
We actually always have that fallback. This is fascinating, Ben. Peter Robbins here. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. My special guest tonight is my friend and colleague, Ben Moss. We are discussing anomalies on the surface of places where they shouldn't be. Return with us in 4 minutes. Don't touch that dial.
Debbie Ziegelmeyer is an experienced diver, dive trainer, and UFO investigator who has researched sites around the world that have water-related UFO activity. We now know that even the Pentagon admits that there are unknown objects in the skies and underwater around the world. Debbie compiled an amazing book to catalog many of these sightings. The Alien Colonization of Earth's Waterways, a reference guide to UFO, USO, water-related activity, has received rave reviews by UFO researchers and the public. The book is available at Amazon.com.
While most near-death experiencers return to this plane of existence with alluring tales of their time spent in the presence of the divine, what happens when one crosses the veil into the afterlife, into the void? In the new book, Dying to Meet Them, Mindy Toutfest describes her journey to the afterlife after a devastating aneurysm, how a strange turn of events would lead her to spiritual growth, divine healing, UFO experiences, and a greater understanding of the universe. Get your copy of Dying to Meet Them today at Amazon.com or visit unxmedia.com for more information on this book and more amazing selections from UnX Media Publishing at unxmedia.com.
And we are back. Peter Robbins, special guest Ben Moss, continuing to roam around the surface of foreign bodies, finding things that we don't think should be there.
That sounds dirty.
So, here we are, back on the surface of Mars. What the hell?
It almost looks like a superimposed image. It's very strange.
I'm going on good faith here from the sites that I've hit. Obviously, there's always a possibility that some of the images have been doctored with. If this is authentic, there's no way it happened in nature.
I can't even really tell what it is.
Yeah, again, right before we went to break, the bathtub. My first thought was almost the back of a ship that, the cabin door is open and is lying out there after the ocean evaporated.
Good call.
Thank you. Now, this one, immediately my eyes went, wow, that's great. Doorway to the unknown, very kind of Egyptian, sort of romantic. And at the same time, my logical mind said, could that happen in nature? I think so. Not out of the question. And at the same time, it does look like a freestanding, triangulated, smaller panel sitting in front of proportions looking intentional, lack of a better phrase, intriguing. And, not every bell and whistle going off, but geez, we see angles lining up and we're predisposed. Speaking about angles lining up, check this out.
Looks like a crab.
I know. And symmetrical crabs with the chevrons in front of both of them.
Yeah, I've got to wonder if this is the same image duplicated twice, but then you've got that.
I think it has to be. It has to be. That's exactly what it is. It's just enough to have it happen once. And we see the arrow off to the right there at that little kind of check mark of dots. It would be intriguing to be able to verify all of this as we go. No question, more questions than answers as we move forward, but gosh, I don't get that that's natural if it isn't doctored. And again, back to simple images. What the hell?
Yeah, that one looks like, almost a weapon, like a tank or an anti-aircraft gun.
And it has, my first look was it almost suggests like threads of a screw.
Exactly, yeah.
But again, your eye can really, especially if you allow the science fiction part, the war movie science fiction part of your mind to take over. Well, you're all set on this one. But I joke not out of nervousness, but just out of we're feeling our way around in the unknown here with the possibility of the odd mischief maker, and at the same time, the way things fractalize. But damned if that doesn't look like a cross in the middle of this picture.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's that camera thing again where it's a very fuzzy picture. They say that because they don't have the bandwidth for color. I don't believe these are ever in really the true color, because when you've seen a color wheel in some of these photographs, the color wheel isn't even right.
Very good point. I think they do their best to suggest something rather than like a black and white movie. There's an intention to try to colorize it and give it some sensibility. Now we're about to look at another shape of a thing, a structure, or a natural formation on the surface of Mars. It's quite unique, and one that stayed with me for a long time.
It's like a teepee.
Yeah. Again, we don't know scale here.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. So it could be the size of a metronome or of, a B-52. Whatever it is, if it's not...
The thing is, when they spot these types of objects, they never seem to go, okay, let's zoom in and see what that really is. They never really, they don't drive up to it. They didn't send the helicopter closer to it before that thing broke. And they just kind of leave it up to your imagination, almost like they're saying, look, we found some really interesting things. Let's see how the public reacts to it.
Well, I think you're making an assumption there that's based on that those pictures don't exist, but that they're classified and that they just simply renumber,
Right.
certain photos accordingly. That we can only imagine the outtakes, the files that they have of images. Again, on certain things, maybe they just got by. On other ones, maybe there are people there that feel, well, it's there. We're not going to call attention to it, but we're playing a pretty dodgy game to start with. Let's just leave it alone and let it be controversial. We won't deny it, but we won't confirm it.
And it doesn't match the terrain.
Here's another obvious fusion.
Yeah.
And we have to assume it's intentional. We also see, I think we looked at an image of this earlier, but smaller. We do see several strong verticals and a rectangle at the top there. And damn.
And it's Clementine, so it's intentional.
Yeah, exactly. Then there's, a myriad of things that I don't know. Some critical facility in me denotes a size too, that it's something you could pick up and hold. Whether or not that's true or not, there's a whole category of objects on Mars that my first thought was, kind of a clay vessel.
Yeah, a gourd.
It could be the simplest piece of pottery, the shape within a shape, that seemingly perfect oval opening, that it's got a dimensionality, and that it just doesn't seem natural.
Or a fossil of some type.
Yep. Yeah, that's even more challenging for many of us. This looks like somebody left their water bottle on a lid.
That's the first thing.
I'm sorry. What? It's obviously an illusion based on some manifestation of light hitting. You know what?
How blurry that is. It's amazingly blurry.
I really like this one. Rover Curiosity, got all the information. Damn.
If that was a sharp image, you'd be able to tell probably what that was if this wasn't so blurred out.
Well, I love that the reference on the lower right with the number is bottle. Thank you, NASA. Okay.
My CDs.
It does. My first thought was, it's some ancient creature's backbone. And then it was, no, it's a bunch of giant buttons. No, it's records. It's silver dollars. It's organized material that is
the vertebrae with a little head on the left with a couple of eye sockets.
Exactly.
Your mind goes everywhere with these images.
It's true. And then just to its immediate right, we're seeing half of a buried rectangle with a whitish edge, or so it seems, and straight above it, I'm pointing like everybody's going to see. It almost looks like, I was thinking, yeah, if I use my cursor, no problem. Everybody seeing that? No, you're not. I'm seeing it. Well, I'm looking directly above. I'm doing it now to entertain myself, but it looks like a little roof with shadow covering something beige or something beige in front of it. And I can accept that that's, a natural formation. But those discs stuck in the Martian soil are something. Reference 4940FA discs.
Yeah.
Boy. Okay, moving on.
Another bottle.
Jeez.
There's that bottle of Chianti I lost.
Well, if it had a candle sticking in it, then, I just would back away. That's one of those ones I think I would feel uncomfortable defending. Again, this looks like aluminum. It looks like part of a machine. It doesn't look like, and I guess it could be some kind of rock. I don't know. But, and then that grayish, well, whatever color it is, far left, that seems to have edges, but is, seated, so to say. And reference 2304A machine. Perseverance. Wow. Imagine being in the control room as you're coming up on these things and knowing you can't talk about a lot of this, but being the first.
Give me the eraser, Bob.
Exactly. Now, this is also classified reference machine, and I think these designations are, sometimes lighthearted, or that they're seeing the same thing we are and don't know what else to say. My first thought goes to, could that thing, that pile of shapes, be, and before I can say the word natural, no, I don't get that. And
It's more
that's
like
striating. Is it some ancient tank or some, long dead triceratops or just
not knowing the size, you really don't have a good reference point.
It's so true. It's so true. Also, just to its left, two circular shapes looking out at us with the classic shape in the middle that, is almost a smile face with one eye smaller than the other. This is where you realize, I think maybe I'm doing this too much. Okay, change of pace.
The famous, this is one of the first ones to get attention.
Yeah.
What? The statue, I think they called it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like, almost like the Virgin Mary with the robe. And
this was one of the ones where I almost felt my alarms go off. It's the classic challenge to your cognitive thinking of running numbers in your head, even if you don't know much about math, of what are the odds. And yeah, but then you get a little closer.
You see that path, yeah.
And gee, what are the odds? And then you come right up on it. And it's amazing we got this. And I'm sorry, I see that as a sculpture of a kneeling humanoid, and that it couldn't happen in nature.
Yeah.
Whatever the size, it
looks female to me with a robe.
Yes.
That's why I said Virgin Mary. It looks like a robe figure.
And once again, this is one of those, you can rage against the universe and say it is an illusion and, wake up. And if we're looking, if that's a valley down there, this thing could be the largest sculpture, larger than any sculpture on Earth. And
you've got to look at the surrounding terrain. There's absolutely nothing else like that in the surrounding terrain.
The other thing is, for anybody that says, right, doctored image, you have the longitude and the latitude. This is something that can be established or reestablished. So if you've got a problem with this phenomena, don't have a problem with the geography. I'm sure there's a Mars Google. Now, once again, is it real or is it Memorex? That shape in the middle there does strike me as Ankh-shaped. The ancient Egyptian symbol for eternal life. Could that happen in nature? Who am I to say no? But once again, intriguing.
What a fascinating planet to walk around on, with the topology is just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. What a dream that would be.
So I'm sure the meteorites, a lot of these are probably meteorites.
This is, again, an example of one of those that I really do like to dismiss. Is that a skull? Oh my God. I don't think so. I think that is a rock or a series of rocks, and that's the way it looks. I get it slightly, but it also doesn't look like a skull at the same time.
And the swimming dog.
Of course. There is that too, yes. Okay. Now we go to an image that I admit may have been enhanced, doctored, or isn't authentic. But at the same time, it really does match in a very certain blunt way, that very early image that we looked at.
Yeah.
It's not the same, obviously, but it's a complicated structure that looks like it has, some reality to it. And again, whether this is enhanced or completely photoshopped, or this is a perfect example for me of if it looks too good to be true, it is too good to be true. And that may be accurate. We can't simply dismiss it because it has no provenance, although I'm happily tempted to. And once again, kind of end this group of pictures with this upside down Mars structure, which I should reverse. So to the moon we go. And for what it's worth, there's a really pioneering book on anomalies on the moon, The Strange World of the Moon. This was published in 1960. So there really was no satellite imagery to look at.
Right.
But the author is a true scholar and, did his best to lay out explanations. It's a very unsensational book. Also, I highly encourage, if you can find this, I think it's probably a difficult one to find. 1976, Somebody Else is on the Moon. George H. Leonard, whose son, I think, continues in the work.
It's a classic. Yeah.
It is. And it's the first book that brought serious attention to the subject, no question about it. So our first little stop on the moon, and this is a scan from, once again, extraterrestrial archaeology. It's not a great image, but that tracking that we're looking at there is problematic if it's not us, and that is the allegation. So let's jump right into things. We don't even have to go any further. If this is an authentic image, and it's certainly been put forward for years as one, we're looking at things that could not, I don't believe, happen in nature. Their structures aligned with each other in, craters. And we see this repeatedly on the moon, hiding in plain sight, so to say.
Yep.
Anybody, if you're lucky enough to afford a telescope that can capture this kind of detail, or have access to one, what do you do when you come across this? Who are you going to call? I'm sure NASA really doesn't want to know, or doesn't want to get into a dialogue about this, and with good cause, because there's nowhere to go after this. I maybe can put our heads together a bit on this and find a way to bring the most pedigreed of this grouping of imagery and its associated images to the attention of some of the folks in Washington who are now wrestling with this issue. And right now with this goddamn Department of Defense report of last month, one of the most arrogant dismissals we've seen since 1947, right up there as far as I'm concerned with the 1997 tome of a book, a beautiful thing to keep a door open with, Roswell Case Closed, the United States Air Force's 500-page
bullshit
magnum opus bullshit, not just normal.
When that came out, I posted on Facebook. I said the only thing the intelligence community has proved is there's no intelligence in the intelligence community.
Yeah, that was the genius volume that tried to convince us that the
U-2 spy plane,
yes, and that the aliens alleged to have been part of the crash site in 1947 were crash test dummies that had somehow passed through the time warp because they weren't developed until 1952, which is one of my favorite things.
And they were 6 feet tall. So they said they compressed when they hit the ground.
I actually years ago, early involved in this work and discussing UFOs with a gentleman in rural Oklahoma, a real man of the land, and who had no problem with the idea of visitations. And what he said stuck with me forever, though, relative to more outrageous claims, which was, my mama told me I was born at night, but not last night.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to the Brookings Institute's report,
1961
or 61. But they said, if a civilization was monitoring us, there would be things on the backside of the moon since it's in tidal lock and doesn't rotate. And when we get there, you can't tell the public. And I think that still holds true. But that they're finding things. They probably don't know where it's from, just like with UFOs. They're probably not real sure what they're dealing with. So there's no way they can say, look, we found stuff. We have no idea what it is. They're violating our airspace, but everything's fine.
And yeah, what are you going to do? Go up against them? Again, the military mindset combined with the fragile human ego, combined with kind of their handicap on us in terms of technological advantages and perhaps intellectual ones as well.
Yeah.
That question of, is there intelligent life on Earth? Okay, once again, and another intriguing, completely unnatural series of what seem to be structures.
That's a pretty clear image too.
I have a week to get ready for each show, and some, more work than others. I had thought, boy, if I had the time to have every JPL number and background information on some of the photographs and the locations on the moon and Mars, but I don't know if that would have added a huge amount to what we're trying to do here and get to the basics about this. Again, any of you are free to pursue this, and it's something that the internet is pretty rich with. So what the hell?
Yeah, we should mention that dead site is www.marsanomalyresearch.com.
Yes.
There's a lot of great images there. The guy pulled them straight from JPL, not altered in any way. And I talked to that gentleman before he passed. Very sincere, very baffled by what he found. And that's a great resource. There's thousands of pictures there.
That is maybe the most important overall piece of information that you can take away from this show in terms of doing your own research and investigation. And we will come back to that URL at the end of the show, just so that you have it down. So have a pencil poised. Okay. Once again, don't get that is natural. But what about this? This is another classic example of somebody saying, oh my God, a giant monster head on the moon. As opposed to, Well,
Pareidolia.
I could buy that somehow, this is one of those things where what is the most realistic possibility? Um, Giant monster head on the moon or play of light on a group of formations? As Stanton Friedman would say, this one is in my gray basket. But as it notes here, darker and lighter comparison of skull looking object. I do appreciate that. Okay, now take a moment here.
Oh, it's got to be huge.
Yeah. There's stuff going on in that crater that...
Yeah, once again, it doesn't necessarily match the terrain around it.
No. And if you look, again, I'm pointing, everybody see my cursor, folks? Almost dead center, about a third of the way down, there is a crater with a kind of a rectangular cut in it at the bottom. At least that's what I'm reading.
It could be the angle of the sun.
Yep. The same way that, well, a meteor comes roaring out of space and crashes into the moon for the zillionth time. Sometimes the debris blows clear. Other times the craters, and the crater in some cases seems so perfect that, it's just this beautiful thing. Other times, perhaps, debris falls back, because I'm looking at the big crater on the upper right and the shapes within it. I'm with this kind of magnification, as well as the one at the lower left, our skull, which can these things happen in nature? I guess so. It's not nearly as definitive as some of the images that we've been looking at. Okay. I love this one for its simplicity and its elegance. And if anybody thinks 3 meteorites coordinated their hit or something, I guess it's possible that could have happened. And I guess it's possible that those are not natural. Possibly the one in the lower left as well. I only say that because it's in the same frame and it jumps out at us. Any thoughts there? Because this one is unlike any other one that I've seen.
It looks like 3 spires, because you have the shadow to the left, the sun to the right. So it looks like they're definitely towering up into the sky.
Yeah. And are they the exact distance from each other?
Sure,
I don't know. They're certainly close enough.
Same size almost, and yeah.
This is just so interesting in terms of the way your mind works, especially after looking at some of the images we've seen. It's so simple, and at the same time, so hard to put it into a box and say, yeah, natural formations. Well, tell me what kind of natural you're talking about and how these things could have happened. Possibly, if they happened at different times, they've weathered the same. It's really emblematic of the intrigue, the mystery associated with this phenomena.
I would call that moon zits.
All right, then. Now, there, I've seen this image in a number of photos now. The dominant image is just totally science fiction. What the hell? Somebody tell me that's photoshopped in there. I'm fine. But again, I've seen it on a number of officially numbered pictures. We also have what looks like some structural activity on the dark background below it. Obviously, my imagination could see that white line wiggling through it as a road. And again, after more than an hour of looking at this material, I'm finding other things that could be equally my imagination or possibly dominated by it. But we do have one major problem here, and that's front and center top. Okay, this is one of the ones that I actually got to see early on. And it's quite wonderful in that in no way, shape, or form, play of lights all you like, that an intelligent person can read that as a crater. It's convex, not concave. Look at the shadow. And it's just not bothered me, but intrigued me that the crater, bottom center, is almost a little too perfect. Maybe it's its proximity to the Silbury Hill thing there, but this is a picture that intrigues me.
Yeah, the one that's highlighted in the box is actually more of a perfect circle than the one below it.
Yeah. Isn't it wild? And the one highlighted in the box is that some associated unnatural formation or shape or structure in the upper right, or something coincidental that looks like a bear in a hoodie with its hand held up. I think I really need to take a break.
Yeah, the shadows are opposite. The shadows of the two are opposite of each other.
True. We have a major problem here, Houston. That's funny. But the shadows for now, wait a second here.
So that would tell you the top one is concave, which is more of a dome. Or am I confusing convex? The one at the bottom looks like the shadow is sun is on the left. The other one looks like the sun is on the right.
Yeah. Well, back to the workshop with this one. Okay.
This one I've seen before, where I heard that they had detailed construction in the crater, and this was one they definitely wanted to hide.
Yeah.
There was like ongoing some of the older books I've read about the moon, when they was able to first start taking pictures, they would see changes in these craters, like there was construction going on and roads being built, and
yes,
and that sure looks like something going on in that bottom large crater there.
Boy, it sure looks like it.
Big mining operation.
Some kind of ongoing operation, or I think even with this quality, if we could just blow this up here right now, we would see some intriguing detail before it kind of decomposed. Once again, can this happen in nature? Too many right angles for me. And yeah, I could see looking down on, part of a major city 5,000 years from now.
Mesopotamia.
Yeah. It's just not out of the question. Even lower left, we see not a circle, well, it is a sort of circular shape. And in the center of that circular shape is something even more circular with detailing on it. Again, we could be looking at a piece of terrain 10 miles, 50 miles across. We don't know. And we don't know how high up we are. A detail that would be wonderful to learn. But once again, is there any logical way this could happen in nature? I don't know the answer.
The bottom right had some contouring also.
Yes, it sure does.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, I'm going to point. It almost looks like a small structure defined by, a white top and a white bottom in the lower right there.
Yeah.
In that darkened area. Oh, yeah. Phoenix 5,000 years from now.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, that looks like a lot of ancient sites, that you find out in the desert and the Sahara that, you get with LiDAR when you penetrate the sand and you get this type of pictures.
Yeah. Okay. I had to knock several out of this sequence just to get in as many different images as possible. This is one that one wants to just say, well, no, this is obviously a put up job. It's just too simple, too good. And this is one I take particularly seriously.
Yeah, it's a nice looking pyramid.
Yeah, nothing ambiguous about that pyramid or
Not at all.
what seems to be an associated rectangular shape with a bit of an arc in the center. Oh, God, it just,
Maybe an eroded sphinx.
well, or a temple of Dendor. There is that simplicity, that thing that whispers in your ear, ancient Egypt.
Yeah, that looks like a four-sided pyramid there.
Yeah. And, with respect to the extraordinary longevity of our Great Pyramid on the edge of Cairo, a 250,000 years from now, it may deteriorate some, even though it's
Yeah.
marble and it probably would look like this from the appropriate distance up.
Some pretty high reflectivity on that also.
Yeah. Now, here's one that I saw a Xerox of in the later 70s that it's like a Xerox, maybe of a second generation photograph that's in Extraterrestrial Archaeology, David Corliss's book from 1976. But here's a photo of it. And for me, once again, game over. This is on the moon. This is absolutely a factual photograph. That straight vertical line is approximately 25 miles long. And those two craters are the most challenging of any photographs in any of these sequences for me. Sure, they can be natural, but that damn thing isn't.
Yeah, it looks like an arch, so the way the shadow is, and those craters, that had to be an impact where it came right directly at the moon at no angle whatsoever to be that perfect.
Yeah. But somebody worked to make that, well, some bodies worked
That
to
was
make
the first McDonald's.
Yeah. All of a sudden, everything came crashing down on me. Again, take a moment, let your eye adjust, and we see possibly two pyramids from, who knows, no, can't be so. Who knows the distance? But that's also something, if somebody could, a geologist, well, blah, blah, blah. I can accept that maybe that happened in nature, maybe, but it's just too pyramidy.
Yeah.
Or if you relax your eyes and you re-look at it and look at those shapes as depressions in the surface rather than convex, that they're concave and that we're looking into a depth. It kind of playing mind games here a little bit, but one can
close together.
Read that image a bit that way.
Yeah, there's another one of those foundations. Yeah, this was one of my favorites.
We really don't have to go much further than this. It simply tells the story, and it has all 4 points. Granted, upper left, the most subtle, but can't happen in nature. This is on the moon. Whatever was there a long time ago, but something, a structure, sat right there. Again, you don't need complex pictures of cities to make the point here. This is as elegant and as powerful, in its own way, as the statue of the woman, which for me is unambiguous, and I kind of wish it was ambiguous. Okay, one of the towers, and this has got to be very tall.
Yeah, and it looks ancient.
It does. And how tall? Is it 5 miles?
There's speculation that one of them is 11 miles, that what Richard Hoagland had postulated.
Again, less dense atmosphere, don't quite have the technology, but some of the skyscrapers that are going up in the Middle East in major cities, in Saudi and other wealthy oil emirates, are tiny still. Even the tallest buildings in the world that, overshadow the Old Trade Center and obviously the Empire State and things, we're talking apples and oranges. Here's a very different. This is intriguing. Its fuzziness also lends to our ability to interpret. Are we looking at a tower in the center there? Are we looking at some energetic movement? Is that white shape off to the right simply light catching the same way it is to the lower left? Or are we seeing something else there? Was this altered in any way? Main thing, though, is there's something in the center that doesn't belong there.
It could be a tower, like you said, or it could be something rising off the surface, leaving a little bit of a plume of dust behind it.
Yep. That one really is open to interpretation. Okay, why did I choose this one?
Is that bar an artifact, or is that actually in the picture?
No, that's. I don't think that's in the picture. I think that's. Could it be? I don't think so. I think it's some indicator. Now I'm not even sure, and I see that
3 dots, 3 craters.
I've got this. Yeah. Actually, 4. There's the top left,
the 4th one down below. Yeah.
And I just realized I misread this when I loaded it in. It should be turned once to the right, that we're not looking at it straight up and down. But be that as it may, intriguing and more ambiguous than, say, back into the completely convincing or completely fake. There's no in between. That's either real.
Those 4 dots from before would seem to indicate that's because they're in shadow, that those are rising up out of the crater. They could be towers catching the top of the sun there.
You're absolutely right, of course. And we see one at the very top left as well.
Yeah, there's no explanation for that dot unless they're up above the sun line.
Yeah. I can't imagine that somebody put them in. Although, why? Yeah. And once again, if this is an authentic photograph,
it's not natural.
Nothing more need to be said. Okay, moving along. Small, but you don't belong there.
Strange shadow.
A major shadow. And, once again, if a credible geologist could explain how something quite towering like that, as I'm talking, I'm looking up just to its right.
Yeah.
At saying those 2, given the bad focus of this photo, those pyramids, maybe.
And far right, there's a long shadow on the one on the far right.
Yep. And there you go, in the center. It's true. And we started this program by talking about remaining skeptical and leaning away, but gosh. Okay, now. It looks like a pair of really long constructed ridges with detailing in the top of each. My first thought was, somebody laid an old-fashioned ruler on the picture. And no, that's not a ruler. Jeez, that's not a ruler. So we return to this tower, which again has to be massive. And is your mind, is the civilization that created that, did they vaporize 250,000 years ago, or are they ones that are keeping an eye on us? Possibly through that. We have so many more questions than answers. Here's a perfect example. My first thought was that is something moving above the surface of the moon at a lively pace with an exhaust. My second thought was that's a very quirky anomaly on the surface of the moon, but I lean toward it being something moving over the planet.
Yeah, that looks like what a true UFO, because it has that field around the black object.
Yes.
Typically
yes.
is a function of the propulsion.
Yes, I have to agree with you there. And thank you for settling my mind on that. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised to see, and there's a whole other separate area of study of these.
Probably
Now,
a lucky photograph, because that thing was probably moving at a really fast pace.
Yeah. There's one more image, and I saved it for last because this is it.
That's definitely a structure.
And again, even though in classic X-File style, I want to believe this is real, that this wasn't a doctored image, that this is in fact is yet one more JPL NASA photograph from whatever mission and whatever photo number, or an aerial shot of an ancient temple complex in Iraq, weathered, the subject of wars, bombing, natural erosion.
Kind of like the structures on the original Star Wars movie.
Yeah, slightly Islamic in terms of the suggestion of design, but also, in a grim way. We here in the West, in America, anybody, who watches news has seen more than their fair share of aerial photographs of places that are the result of war, the result of destruction. And, all you need to do is Google ancient sites damaged during the Iraqi war to get a whole nother perspective on this.
It's almost like a lake to the right.
It does.
Yeah.
And
that looks like water erosion more than anything, the up above on the left.
It does, and we're stuck with that. Whether or not, again, it's what it seems to be. And it was just that 150,000 years ago, 50,000, 400, or 4 million. We're kind of ending where we started off. We don't really know what's going on here, except that, in the words of a wonderful early Bob Dylan song, something is happening and you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones? 40 plus years in this, and I still feel like an absolute beginner sometime. I'm so glad that we share this interest, because I wouldn't have done this show and dug back into these archives if it hadn't been for you posting these regularly, Ben. Will you keep doing that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll keep them coming.
And if you are not Facebook friends with Ben, you should be. Let me ask you.
Or go to the UFO Guys on Facebook. That's where I put a lot of all multiple type
UFO Guys on Facebook. Absolutely. And once again, please give my viewers and listeners the URL of the Mars Anomaly site.
It's www.Mars Anomaly. I always spell anomaly wrong. Anomaly Research, all one word, MarsAnomalyResearch.com. It's a static site. He stopped posting, I think, in 2016 or so. But everything from undersea, these are images taken from satellites that he pulled directly from the official government resources. But, mining under the sea, 7 miles deep. He has the moon, Mars, what looks like trees on Mars. I mean, just all kinds of strange stuff, and not edited at all. The guy was very sincere. He just pulled them raw, and he gives you a link so you can go directly to that image. And I've checked them. It's the same image that he posts on his site is what you'll find, if they still exist, at JPL. The funny thing is that back then he was tracking people that were visiting their site, and they were coming from JPL, NASA, DIA, NSA, CIA. Those were the people that were visiting his site.
Whoa.
And he would
one of the things that immediately grabbed my attention about his site is it is so unsensational, so sedate looking, so almost clerical, that you don't open up a page and see lots of images. You just see lines of text.
Right.
And you don't know what you're going to see until you click on the technical information about the image.
Yeah.
It sounds like a really first-class source for all of us to know. And because there is so much specious crap on the internet, and so much of it looks so good.
The AI generated images are always black and white, and they say, well, found this from 75 years ago, and immediately I can look at the color and go, well, that was generated by AI.
A character reference in this kind of research is really important. It's one of the reasons why a lot of us are old school to a good degree in our research, and that's why we built libraries in great part. That information that has appeared in print, been reviewed, been questioned, stood up to challenges, is so essential. And to just know that information about the guy that built this site is golden. That's really wonderful to know. We have a few short minutes left, and I'd like your opinion on something, Ben. After a number of years of a kabuki play, a giant soap opera in the House of Representatives of, are we going to get more information? Gosh, senators and congressional representatives on the left and the right are showing interest in this subject. Is it possible that we're going to head toward a critical mass and have more and more people? And last week, the Department of Defense drops this bomb in the form of a report. And it dismisses truly anomalous UFOs as representative of civilizations in our future, or civilizations in advance of us under technology, under intelligent control, essentially throwing us back to a variation on the original excuses from 1947. The twist for me was this is done for the first time, like, gosh, we're all interested in this now. And now that we're looking at it, we have some of these really courageous people that you see as whistleblowers who did have the security clearances that they claim and do have good service records, but they put 2 and 2 together and they got 3. Their own enthusiasm kind of carried them away. We salute them for their service to the United States, but everything is explainable in conventional terms, folks, and even more now because we have so much exotic stuff in the air. Nothing to see here. Go home.
Yeah, my opinion is not popular, but after 40 years of looking into this and cases and everything, Howard Bloom wrote a really good book called Out There about it, but there is a secret UFO working group that you will never hear about, you will never see, you will never know who's in it. They pull all the strings. They're the ones that threaten Grush and everybody else. Yeah. They will never, ever allow disclosure for the very simple fact that if we have if Roswell, I believe, actually happened, crash of an ET craft, the technology is to be used for military purposes. And the reason for that is because if there were crashes in Russia or China, they've got that technology too. There's no way they can go back and say, look, we've been lying to you all this time. There's things flying around, maybe even taking people out of their houses, but don't worry about it because it's under control, even though we don't know what the hell it is. So in my opinion, disclosure is a myth. That'll never happen. They'll dangle it out there to lead you down another rabbit hole. But when you chase that carrot down a rabbit hole, eventually you're going to realize there is no carrot. It's just another path leading you to nowhere.
Ben, I salute you for having that attitude. It may well be true, or there is a struggle going on. No question, there are people within the intelligence community who I think enough already would like this to be out. Others who represent that view that you have. I guess more than anything, time will tell. Our 2 hours are gone, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
I appreciate it.
I know we will be back later this year. In the meantime, thank you for myself, my guest, Ben Moss. And meanwhile, here on Earth, we will see you next week.
Thanks, Peter.
My pleasure.